Thanks for tuning into this episode of FinTech Focus TV, powered by Harrington Starr, the global leaders in financial technology recruitment. Head over to the Harrington Starr website where you'll be able to find all the latest jobs in financial technology across the globe. You'll also be able to download the latest issue of the Financial Technologist magazine, including the Top 1% Workplace Awards. Finally, if you're looking to grow your team, please get in touch. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby Babb, and I'm delighted to have here in the studio today Himesh Soneji. How you doing, mate?
Good. Thanks, Toby. Thanks for having us.
Listen, it's great to have you in here. We've been talking about this for a little while, so to make it actually happen has been brilliant. Legend of the space, someone who everyone's going to know really well in the area. We've always had great chats, and I think we last bumped into each other out in Paris a couple of months ago over at Trade Tech. Started chatting about various bits and pieces, and you were doing some really interesting stuff. So I want to get into that, but also I think it's a really interesting thing that you're doing within the space. We want to talk about electronic trading as a general sort of area and the sort of route into it. Bust some myths, tell people how they can make themselves, employable within the space. But then also talk about a few of the trends that we're seeing out there at the moment, and then dive into a little bit more about the overall ecosystem and everything in between. So it's going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to it. No pressure.
As am I.
So let's kick off. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Himesh, and what's going on and what you're up to at the moment.
Yeah. So I guess my background is very much in the sort of trading technology space, right? Very much engineering. So currently I'm in sales, but I was born out of sort of network engineering and jumping on switches and fixing problems and all these sorts of things that happen. But I think as I developed through my career, one of the things I really liked was that I really enjoyed interfacing with the business. I really enjoyed talking to customers. It kind of brought something out of me which I didn't really realize I had inside me. So I've worked at a number of different places over the years, hedge funds, exchanges, banks, so on and so forth. But my career has very much progressed into a kind of customer and sales focus sort of role. And about, let's say about 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, as we were coming into COVID, which was quite interesting, I decided to start my own business. So I had a couple of mentors. So Kevin Covington, who I think you might know as well, came to me and said, look, I think there's a gap in the market where there's a number of these trading technology firms that are really looking for someone that's customer facing, can articulate how they want to be seen in the business, but they have to be technical as well. And he said there's about 3 or 4 of these types of firms out there, and really they don't want someone full-time, they want someone part-time. So he said, look, why don't you start something? So I've thought about it and I thought it was a good idea. And there's another guy called Kieran Kennedy who does a similar thing to me in the US. We started up our own firms and we started working with a couple of these smaller trading technology firms. And effectively, it was interesting because I went into that sales world a little bit, bit new, bit green, and we'll come on to that a bit later because we said we'll touch upon it later. But I think through all of that journey, I think what I realized was, I think I was a salesperson masquerading as an engineer, really. But what it did is it set me up for where I am in my career at the moment, where I'm able to have these technical level conversations, but still be a business person, be a commercial person, be someone that's like from the sales world, but not necessarily a salesperson. So I'm now working with a couple of firms out there. So I work with TNS, who are all about sort of low latency ecosystem and co-location play. Great firm, growing aggressively. I am now started with Blackcore Technologies, who I'm starting there, and that fits inside that sort of high frequency and overclock server world, which is with Kieran Kennedy coincidentally as well. And then
full circle.
full circle. And then I've also done some specialist stuff with kind of some hollow core cable providers, NKT Photonics, Timebeat, who are a great in the sort of timing space. So the idea is to have this world of high frequency and algorithmic trading sort of technology, which is kind of sitting together with each other. So that's what I'm doing at the moment, basically.
Do you know what? It's really interesting to say, and I want to jump the conversation we touched on there forward a little bit, because I was with someone who's worked a lot with VCs over the last year, big US VC businesses, earlier on this morning, and he was talking about the issue with founders, and he was talking about sort of founders, tech founders, being sort of very almost removed from sales or scathing of sales teams, saying that the product's so great, it's the best product that's ever been made. Why would we need to sell it, etc. And I think I've seen that over the years as being an issue, which is probably diminishing a little bit as I think people have become a little bit more commercial. But it is a problem that traditionally tech people and salespeople, never the twain shall meet, right? And you're seeing two people there who've got sort of almost completely different views of the world. Yeah. We were talking about the sort of when I first started looking at salespeople within the trading technology space, it was a lot of bluster and a lot of charm and charisma and really rule the wine bars, etc., etc. And behind it, you had people there who knew what they were talking about to come in and translate it over once people have been wined and dined. And I think that salesperson has really struggled over the last 5 years or so. And you've seen this sort of move of technical people who are able to translate this a little bit more. And I think over the sort of 24 years that I've been in the space, you've seen that IT used to be very much over here. And it would be people there who would very much last resort speak to anyone. And then you'd have a sales team that were over here and last resort would want to have anything to do with anything technical. And over the years, you've seen this sort of merge closer and closer as more people have been drawn to technology, and it's not had some of the stigmas, I guess, it's had in the past towards it. And salespeople recognise that they can't, there's much more information out there for buyers. People are much more knowledgeable. And I think your space that you're in, and exactly, I think you said you described yourself as a sort of as an engineer network or a salesperson network masquerading as an engineer. Is to have that sort of that genuine sector ability to translate complex technology over to people who aren't necessarily technical. That's a golden gift at the moment. I think it's really important that people sort of focus in on that sort of area as well, right?
I think so, yeah. And I think there's actually really two sides of that, because you do absolutely have that construct there, which communicating technical aspects to a non-technical person on the other side of the table, let's call it, right? I don't like that term because, it's kind of showing that you're opposite each other and you're not, it's a team. Yeah. Anything in sales should be about teamwork, whether it's with a client, whether it's internal, or whoever you're working with. Yeah. But I think it's also to the fact that the buyers are becoming more sophisticated in not in terms of understanding because they can Google things. It's not that. But if we look at the explosion of quantitative trading firms out there, a business development person understands the nitty-gritty of how execution works and how a low latency switch can be put into the path so that it's faster execution for trades. All of those sorts of things means that the buyer is a much more sophisticated person. Yeah. And actually, if we think about, as these quant firms have hundreds of people all over them trying to sell them things, want them their service support. But the reality is that they've only got so much time. Yeah. So, if we look at the traditional sales cycle, which was like, hi, I am so-and-so from this place, and we do this, and they're like, great, I want to know a bit more about it. Let me book a call with my sales engineer. And often that there's a little bit of loss in translation there, because the sales engineer doesn't really understand the context of what's going on, what the business needs. The salesperson has a clue, but he doesn't know how that, or she doesn't know how to translate that.
And overselling at the same time.
And overselling, and it's they're looking at not what they're trying to achieve for the customer, it's more around my quarterly target.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, I understand a quarterly target is important, and that's how sales works. But the reality is, I think, and this is why I very much appreciate the businesses that I work with, they don't necessarily say, well, this quarter you have to have this done. Not every business is like that, and some of my competitors in the space as well operate differently. But the way that we kind of see things in the businesses I work with is it has to be about longevity. It's got to be about trust. sometimes I will come out and say, actually, the solution that we're offering is not what you're looking for.
Yeah.
There's no point of, pushing a square peg through a round hole. There's just no point to it. So I think that structure of how the industry has moved on has meant that there has to be a new solution to this. And I guess luckily for me, there's not many people out there at the moment that are doing it. Why do
you think that is?
I think it's a knowledge thing. I think that's one of the things. It's complicated when we think about high frequency trading systems, electronic trading, whatever it is. There's an element there which you have to understand the components of it. Now, some people do. My MD at TNS, Alistair Watson, he understands this really well. He claims that he doesn't, but I would never tell him this. He's going to see this now, but he's brilliant at it because he's been through it, and I think it comes from experience. Someone who's been born into sales in their career finds it quite difficult to take that step sideways into the technology world, but someone that has been not necessarily technology but project management or something else, they've had that visibility. They've seen, well, what was important to my customers at the time, what was the pain points that I saw, and that leads them down a path that says, when I'm suggesting solutions, when I'm solutionizing a sale, and that's a key thing, solutionizing, it's finding the right fit for that customer, and I think that's so important.
I want to talk about that solutionising because there'll be people in here, and I want people to be watching this and thinking about their sort of career in this, because as you were talking and saying about competitors and thinking about, and I was saying, why, etc., there is, to me, a skills gap, that generational skills gap, that you haven't seen the next wave of people necessarily come through from the names that I've been seeing for the last, certainly 13 years since we started the company up, and you expect to sort of layer on layer, but there's a lot of names that are still, when you think immediately of the people who are the players and the best salespeople within this space, they're names who I've known for a long time. Yeah. And I can't think of a generation behind that who are doing the same things that generation was doing a little bit beforehand, which is an interesting sort of play to make on it, right?
It really is.
So when we're thinking about that, and I can think of some people who are the next gen, let's call it, within the space. I know Fix are doing a lot with next gen people at the moment, and there's some really interesting things that's happening there at the moment. But if people are watching this and looking at you and sort of thinking about what they can take away from this, and thinking about the sales processes and how they can really succeed in their career and succeed in electronic trading at the moment, I'm thinking through some of the things you've said already, and that's about having that sort of solutionized sales, and there'll be people there who are thinking about that and nodding and then not necessarily knowing what it means. I think there'll be people there who are talking about credibility and putting the time in to then have that ability to speak to people and translate. But tell me a little bit of a few of the gems that you put in there to say, look, if you are thinking about wanting to be successful within this space and wanting to sort of forge that career and do some, maybe the transition that you've had in your career as well, and evolve and create it. I know you're an avid networker as well, at the same sort of stage, and you mentioned some of the companies you work with, but I think I said it before at the start of it. Not with no tongue-in-cheek intended at all. Is there's a lot of people who know you, and you've got a great reputation, and you're really well respected in the space, and that network's allowed you to go out there and do what you've done at the moment. So if people are thinking about that and doing that, tell us a little bit with your thoughts on what people can sort of take away from your journey. So
look, I think
I know you don't like talking about yourself.
No. I think. One of the things that I do is I'm very active on LinkedIn, as you know, and I think everyone that's going to be watching this is probably the people that know me would know how active I am. But I think that's just the getting my name out there. Yeah. In terms of what is useful. And look, I'm still on a journey as well. I don't have all the answers. Nobody does. And I think anybody who feels they've got all the answers is already at a disadvantage, right? There's no way that everybody has all the answers. So I think what's helped me is I've always approached things to say, be useful, and we were talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger's book just
he stole it from you, right? That's what I heard.
That's it, it's copyrighted now. But I think that it's interesting. His book is called Be Useful, and the whole context of it is, at the end of the day, if you want to make something work, you have to empower yourself to do it, right? And I know this sounds a little bit, self-help type book thing, and I'm really not into those, but there are nuggets from those which do make sense, where, you are working somewhere, and I'm sure this has it with your company, and you got your team that are going out there and working with your clients and all that sort of stuff. And it's about, anyone can just pick up, like, if we think about a job description, the reality is that job description is written in a way that's going to get them, let's say, 20, 30 candidates. But what's going to make them really, what's that one candidate going to be presenting that's going to make them the one that's been chosen? And it's not just what's written there, it's about what are you proving that you can add as added value. Added value is so important, and I think everybody talks about added value just as a throwaway comment, but added value is different things to different people. It's, hey, and one of the things that I do with my customers is I almost do the technical stuff for them. So I talk to customers and they're like, my team is really struggling with this. I'm like, look, let me jump on a call with them and we'll work it through. And, if I can't deal with the technical stuff, I'll bring someone in. But this is after I've sold something. And that kind of ability to say, I'm going to go that extra mile, is what someone says, do you know what? I think that's great. I want to work with you. I'll continue working with you. And it doesn't get talked about enough. I mean, I'm incredibly fortunate to be working sort of in a part-time consultative role in this world. It's not the norm in any shape or form. I think you know that as well. And the reason why I'm there and not good there, be doing it for a lot longer, is because of the added value. It's never seen as, well, I need to be holding your hand doing this stuff. I'm always trying to do the things that they expect of me and more. And that's not just the customer, that's internal. I fall down on that sometimes. I am guilty of this as everyone, where sometimes I might let my standards slip with how I talk to someone internally. But if that does happen, I will go away and reflect, and I'll say, I shouldn't have done that. I've got a great saying in TNS, it's called "What would Al do?" Because I find Alistair quite calm and measured in his day. He used to be at UBS, so he's quite approach on how and measured on how he works on things. And I look at that as an example. And, it's not just with someone like Alistair, but it's also with Kevin Covington, who's one of our mentors. And, it's understanding, use people as an example. Look at someone that you think, do you know what, I really like how they operate. Understand them, observe them, and really take those lessons away, right? The good lessons, not the bad lessons necessarily. So, and I guess that's the other thing, is mentors. Having a mentor is so important. It really is, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you are able to find a mentor that works for you, they don't always work for you, but if you're able to sort of cycle through a few of them and find, actually, I'm going to add them value, they're going to add me value, there's a wealth of experience there that you're going to be able to kind of take into your own world, and then actually present that as whether it's a commercially viable thing from a sales perspective, or whether it's a efficiency thing in whether you're a project manager or engineer. And I think that's really important. And I think if I would have to say what's this thing that's got me to where I am, it's the extra effort. One of the classic stories, and I promise I won't talk anymore, is...
Go on, I'm soaking it all up. I love the idea of everything.
One of the things that, when I started my career, my first job at university was shift operations. And it was at Reuters, actually. So I was like, the guy was on the screen looking at red alerts coming up and so on and so forth. I actually applied for the job because it said network controller, thinking it meant a network engineer, but it wasn't.
Close enough.
But I had this mentor at the time who, this when I was at university, and said, do you know what, it's a great firm. Reuters is a household name. Maybe you should try it, and it gets you in there. So I went for it. It was shift work, and it was horrendous. Like, I was doing nights and days, and I didn't know what way was up, and it was horrible. But what I actually started to do at that point is say, well, where do I want to get to? I want to be a network engineer at that time. So what I actually did is I approached some of the teams internally and said, do you know what, I really want to learn network engineering. and we had this thing of we had like 5 days off because of shift work. So what I would do is on my days off, I'd go and work with a network engineering team for free, just because I wanted to learn it. What other way was I going to learn it? Yes, I could take a course, but there was going to be nothing like getting that real world experience.
And word gets around.
And then I had another mentor, Reza Sultan, who's now at Sky, but he was one of the main network engineers. And he took me under his wing and taught me everything he knew. And then, I kind of built my career in that way. But I think if I hadn't have done that, if I hadn't have said, look, I will do that for free. I mean, people are probably looking at me going, what? You work for free while you had a job. Now, maybe I would have got to where I am even if I hadn't have done that. But the reality was that it, like you said, it gets noticed. It's, you're doing something
I don't think you do get to where you are because, without doing that sort of thing personally. It's like, and it's, it goes back to the things there, isn't it, about where you show up, what you do, what you say no to, what you say yes to. And we touched on it before about, you mentioned the social media piece, and I think, by being there's lots of people who cannot be active on LinkedIn. There's lots of people who can choose to say, I can't think of what to say. Easiest thing in the world. I hear it all the time. Like, I can't. No one wants to hear what I've got to say. I can't think of anything. And from that, you never get this sort of ability to talk to however many people, tens of thousands of people who are following you every single day, and thinking of your name as it pops up. I'm a massive believer in that. But I'm also a massive believer in being physically out there and at events. And we bumped into each other a lot, and that's where these sort of conversations start to happen, which then lead on to other things as well. And I think going back to the Be Useful thing, and we've talked about the book, which is a great read for anyone who's looking to do it, but it's that ability to put yourself in that position to to have those things doing it. And I don't think there's an awful lot of people who go into a job and do more than is expected of them. And I think that is there's something I love as a mantra, which is always do more than is expected of you, full stop. And that's a classic example of where you can go into that. You spoke before we came on air about people put off the finance industry and there's sort of brain drain away from the finance industry because people haven't necessarily gone to Oxford or Cambridge or had an imperial degree or a mathematics first or whatever it may be, or computer, whatever it might be. They're sort of put off thinking, right, the doors are closed to finance if you haven't been to Red Brick or Harvard or whatever it may be. But the doors are open in lots of different ways, and it can move you through that sort of thing. So tell me a little bit about your sort of advice there.
It comes back to, again, being useful. And it's about getting yourself out there knocking on doors. And, it's I think it's easy for... Well, actually, and I think one key thing here because you're going to have a number of different types of followers. You're going to have university graduates, people that didn't necessarily go to university, couldn't get their grades. It's funny actually. Jeremy Clarkson puts out his I got a B, whatever it was.
A-level result day tweets, isn't it?
And everyone kind of has a raise their eyebrows like, oh, it's easy for you to say. But the reality is that,
isn't it?
But the reality is, I think if you don't get the grades that you want, or you don't go to the university you want, or you don't achieve everything you wanted from an educational perspective, it doesn't mean the doors are closed in any shape or form. It just means that, yes, you need to think a bit more dynamically. You need to think, well, okay, how am I going to get myself noticed by these types of companies which necessarily would not see me, and they would be looking at the graduates that they've just recruited. And by the way, doing the graduate program in sort of these huge companies isn't necessarily the best way either. You are kind of structured in this program which sometimes stops your ability to be innovative and think outside the box sometimes, right? They are kind of like, they want you to be molded in the company world. Not to say that if you are on it, it's a bad thing. I'm just saying that there's always two sides of the story, and I think it's very important to know that. I didn't go to a fantastic university. I went to a pretty good one, but the reality is what drove me beyond that is to say, actually, here's what I want to achieve. And yes, the traditional path of a graduate program might not be available to me. How am I going to achieve it? How am I going to do this?
Chapter 1 of Be Useful, isn't it? Clear vision.
Clear vision, yeah, exactly. And I think, that's one of the key things. And is one of my relatives actually he was actually a partner at KPMG. And he had this great story, and I think about it now to this day. And he used to tell me that when he was a graduate, he had as KPMG do, have loads of graduates everywhere. And he said that one of the things that really got him noticed from day one was, and this is going back a few years, mind you, but he's like, they'd print out kind of prospectus or PowerPoints or whatever it was for customers. And what he'd always do is he would make sure that it was stapled in a corner in an angle, every single one, every single time. And that was enough for him to get noticed by one of the senior managers who said, "Wow, who stapled these?" Right? And it's a basic example, but it's those sorts of things where you think, do you know what? Those kind of things get noticed.
I was speaking to it reminds me of, I went to speak to the general manager at the Ritz Hotel.
Right.
Because I was reading about their customer service. And in a similar sort of way, in the rooms in the Ritz, they sort of have the paper and the pen at the same angle every single time that someone comes into the room, because it's got that continuity. And I think it's those little bits of thought that people put into things that make a big difference and end up sort of making you stand out. So I think that whole concept of not being intimidated by who you're up against or what people are looking for, but going in there and being present and networking and putting yourself in front of people and persistence. I mean, I remember back in the credit crunch time, I was speaking on BBC Radio, and they sort of brought a whole load of long-term unemployed people in to speak to us, and we were sort of coaching them through things. And the thing that really struck me was they're all great people and all motivated and wanted to get a job, but they were very happy to hear no, and then walk away from it as if that was the end point for them, right? And it's you've been in sales now for a while, and I think if you hear no and just accept that for every single time you're doing it, you're going to get nowhere in life full stop. So the ability to look at different ways and points of entry to allow yourself to get to that is incredibly important and incredibly easy to overlook.
I mean, it's really interesting you say that. No, that term in sales usually comes off the back of a really strong pitch.
Yeah.
And the reality is you shouldn't be in a situation that's no. It should be a conversation.
Yeah.
There should be what can I do to help? How can we help you?
Yeah.
And that
this comes back to the solution piece that you're talking about beforehand. Yeah. Let's move into solution sales, because I think that's a really interesting point to look at. We touched on it a little bit before, but if you were to describe solution selling at its best, and part of that is first the discovery piece, right? Because if you're not getting that discovery, you can't provide the solution that people need. Tell me a little bit about your thoughts on what world-class solution selling looks like. I know that's not something we scripted, but
yeah, I mean, no, I think look, solution selling is, first of all, you need to understand the world, right? You've got to understand the world that you operate in.
Yeah.
What is, in my case, it's electronic trading, and I'm not a trader. I don't ever even pretend to be, but I understand the mechanics around it, and I understand the components around it. So I think understanding, first of all, your world around you, but then it's about listening. Honestly, people say this, and it's sales 101. Listen.
Yeah.
People rarely do it.
Yeah.
They're so eager to get
what
their
they want
pitch
to get
out.
across.
Yeah. And the pitch is, in my opinion, is 2000s and 1990s and 1980s now. Pitches work to a point where you just say, hey, this is what we're about, this is what we do as a company, and this is what I'm about. That's what your pitch should be. That's it. You shouldn't be selling things. It's about what the customer needs. If there's a real fit there, that's where it's going to work. I don't think I've ever come across a situation where someone's gone, do you know what? I did not know that's what that's what's usable in this industry. You really inspired me. I'm going to buy that. I've never come across that. I don't think any salesperson nowadays does. So I think it's that whole, understanding what is required from the customer or client or prospect or whatever it is, being honest. Honestly, I just can't emphasize how much honesty is important in this, because at some point it will unravel.
Yeah, we've seen that in businesses who oversell and overpitch, and then the products are rapidly made to salute what they've oversold, and the pressure gets put onto it. It becomes buggy, and people get pissed off with it, and you lose your reputation. We've seen lots of companies. I'm sure you have. I have,
and the other thing as well is when you're as an individual and you're working with these companies, sometimes you have to know when it's not working for you.
Yeah.
I've had that in my career where I've worked at somewhere and it's just not worked for me. Not because the product wasn't great, not because they didn't have a good customer base or anything like that, but my unique skill set just wasn't suited to that product.
Yeah.
And you need to know when to walk away. I mean, it's fine. Everybody needs to put food on the table. I get that.
Yeah.
But are you going to be excelling in that role, in that company, for that product?
Yeah.
And that's an important question, I think, you need to ask.
I think it's the same, isn't it? I equate it over to the day job of recruitment. If there's a company who, I know it's much easier for me to sell a business that I'm really passionate about because I've spent that time and got that connection with that business. And when you're doing somewhere where you've been kept at arm's length, you haven't got the information, you're not being sort of bought into the company as much, it's a much harder sell to then push it over to someone there who you are basically telling to trust their livelihood into the decision they're about to make.
Yeah.
And I think that sort of, I think the interesting thing about your world is that products have become a lot more bespoke.
Very.
And the old days of in my mind electronic trading was here's an enterprise product and you take it or you leave it.
Yeah.
Right now it's about let's listen to what you're actually looking for and tailor that how the product works for you. Interoperability's got a big part to play on that. The whole desktop as a whole has got a whole part to play on that. But everyone wants something that's tailored to them, and it can be now. And I think that's a really important part to say. Right, let's understand where you're at. And I know it sounds obvious, but common sense and common practice don't always go together.
No, they don't.
Sort of thing.
I think when you're under pressure and you've got a number of things that you're trying to understand and you're trying to sell and you're trying to do whatever or engineer, there's always something, and it's about having that clarity, and it's easier said than done. But being organised, being a little bit more active on how you operate with your customers or your internal teams is so important, right? And I think you can make a lot of headway by just being organised. My wife's actually a personal organiser.
There you go.
And then, she's teaching me some great lessons as well at the moment about personal organisation.
It's an incredibly important part of it, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
You've got this wonderful sort of bird's eye view of the electronic trading space now. You're not labelled to one business and saying this is our only view of the world. You've got this sort of a brilliant, wonderful portfolio sort of view of an industry. I think they call it fractional now, don't they? It's a cool way of saying that you're around it. So you're a fractional guy.
Put that on LinkedIn later.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But this sort of overview of the world gives you this sort of really, I guess, unbiased view of what's happening and where we're going. This will probably be out end of 23, start of 24. Right. If we think about where we're at now, we're recording this at the end of last day of October.
We are.
Unbelievably
Halloween
close to the end. Let's hope there's no fright night on the rest of this today. But so it's a really interesting time as we look into what's been a volatile year with market volatility, everything happening at various different stages. People investing longer sales cycles, lots of different things, and as meta themes across the industry that are really difficult to predict. So if we look to 2024 and think about what we might see there, I know there's going to be volatility around that. So we're not going to hold you to anything which you're saying here. But if you think about where it's trending for the industry, if you think about what's going to be happening as sort of themes that you believe will be important for people to get right in electronic trading next year, what do you think they'll be?
Look, I think crypto really stung a lot of people, right? We're also expecting a big SEC announcement around crypto as well. So there's companies that are saying, do I stick with crypto? Do I move into traditional asset classes? I think depending on what happens with that SEC ruling as well, we will start to see new companies pop up that may have been in the crypto world that are taking their strategies and moving it into traditional asset classes. I think, as these companies start seeking volatility and start seeking, and bear in mind my world is more the HFT and the algo world, which are companies looking for, shall we say, inefficiencies in exchanges. We are definitely seeing Asia as a big playground at the moment where people are moving into. We're seeing mainland China firms coming over to the US particularly and looking at sort of building out their strategies for more, shall we say, more structured market perhaps.
Big place from Hong Kong Stock Exchange and that sort of thing recently.
Very much so, and I think we'll see a continued build out. So where we are also starting to see some things is where you've got these traditional hedge funds that are saying, do you know what, I love this multi-manager model. I mean, the multi-manager model is starting to pick up, and it's been quite big in the US, but I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of that in Europe as well. And that requires build out. So we will likely see some sort of technology investments on that side. The great thing, which for me is great here, is a lot of these firms aren't necessarily geared up to build this stuff themselves. So who do they turn around to? They turn around to a TNS, or they turn around to a Blackcore and say, we need this infrastructure, we need these co-locations. They're not going to go and build this themselves because it's so cost prohibitive. So I think we'll start seeing some new players enter the market. We'll see the traditional big HFTs still continuing doing their stuff.
Particularly with, I think VC companies are looking for those investment vehicles again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how that would work because it's less consistent returns, right? I think with sort of these multi-manager and stuff, you'll start to see these up and downs, which VCs don't tend to like.
But they are looking at sort of innovative tech at the moment, right? And they are keen to look at areas again now. We're just starting to see it. We're just starting to see that turn of right, freeze it, and it's a classic cycles, right? Isn't it? And I've been talking to them, and they're all pretty bullish about 24. They've all got dry powder. Yeah. They've all, they all know cycles, etc. And if you put it in now, it's going to be cheaper for them than it is if they're putting it in 18 months' time, 2 years' time, etc.
And I think, to answer your question, I guess, where we're going to see that investment, I think there'll be more platforms coming in. There'll be more AI-driven types of. I hate the term AI, by the way, because I think it's a loaded term. But I think we'll start seeing more intelligent processing of data. I think that's going to be a key thing that we'll start to see. And exposure to things like crypto ETFs and all this sort of stuff, which I think people want exposure to, but they don't necessarily want to be in it. So I think we'll start seeing a lot more of that. And I think it has been quite quiet. If I'm honest with you, this year it's been a bit, we know a couple. And we know a couple of big hedge funds which are launching as well, which are going to be, newsworthy kind of segments. But we'll see. I think you will start to see more of that kind of smaller firms becoming bigger firms, the multi-manager world.
It's been an interesting year for the exchanges, to say the least, on it, and trading houses as a whole. Some fairly big announcements out of IG today. We've not, I think I can't remember the exact number, but I was looking at how many companies have listed in London over the course of the last 6 months, and it's minuscule in comparison to where it wants to be. And they've suffered. There's been no shortage of press about the fact that it's been a difficult area. Do you see that becoming a brighter future in 24, or are we premature for that?
I mean, look, if I'm completely transparent with you, I'm not really sure. I don't really get involved with those kind of companies listing and how it affects the trading strategies and so forth. My bit is when they know what they want to buy, they can buy it as quick as possible. But I understand your point, and I think coming back, from a macro point of view, it's the economy is starting to pick up a little bit more, and we're in a turbulent time at the moment, as we know, in the world, and how that's going to play out in the world of trading, I don't know. Is anyone's guess at the moment.
Let's talk to you about what you do know, which is sort of like buying processes within that. I don't think I've spoken to a business who haven't talked about big pipelines, but incredibly frustrating sales processes and timelines on the basis of that. And it's been, it's never been an industry that sort of people make decisions quickly for the right reasons at the same sort of time. But those processes have been elongated over quarters as opposed to months. Which has been probably the biggest, I think, differentiator for me. So as a salesperson who's looking at that and encouraging people to make decisions and stop this sort of analysis paralysis sort of basis and helping people circumnavigate the fear, what would you say that the sort of key to that is at the moment?
To be honest, it's a lot of cost reduction stuff. I think there's nothing like presenting a cost reduction to someone in what they wanted to achieve, right? I mean, it's slightly difficult when it's a new thing that they're looking at, but where I'm working with clients is because they're either not happy with the service that they're getting from their incumbent at the moment, or they're being overcharged or whatever it is. And I think one of the reasons why we're, Alistair and I, from a TNS perspective, are having a lot of success is because we're just transparent. We're just open with them. We're saying, here's how we operate. This is the cost that we have. This is how we are making money. It's a modest way of doing it. And I think people appreciate that. They're just going, do you know what? that makes sense. I'm reducing my costs. You're going to give me a better service, and actually I can expect an overall better outcome.
Yeah.
Of course, we have to deliver on that, right? And that's a big part of it. And I think
that execution piece is
execution is so important, and I think that's why the clients I work with trust me, because when they sign the contract, I'm not moving on to the next thing. I'm making sure that's delivered all the way through to the end.
Well, this is my big, my big feeling about there is a lot of transactional people, and then the relationship, and this goes back to everything we've been talking about over the last half hour or so, is all about adding value and being valuable and building a relationship with people as opposed to transacting. And I think that to me is a big move forward for the industry, is it's become far less transactional and far more embedded as a sales process over time. And if I'm summarising what we've been talking about so far, it's we're saying be useful, do more than expected of you, work hard, network yourself, add value through be that through social media, LinkedIn, or whatever it might be. And know your shit, expression.
Yes,
and that comes. There's a little bit of time around that, but it's also investment, isn't it? It's speaking to people, and that might well be through your mentors, that might be through taking an interest or listening as much as anything else from what people you're talking to. So
I think it's interesting. Just coming back to the LinkedIn piece, because I go quite personal on LinkedIn, and the reason why I do that is not because I want everyone to know what I'm doing in my personal life.
Well, you did have a lovely breakfast yesterday.
the people that I work with, I want them to understand who I am. I want them to understand that these other things are important to me, and that doesn't necessarily mean to be work stuff. It's how I interact with my personal life. Here with my kids, here with my wife. And it's not for everyone. I'm not suggesting everyone go out there and put stuff that's personal out there. I do it because I think when people are interacting with me, I want them to know who I am, that they can trust me. So I have this blend of sort of technical level, work-related stuff, but I also have personal stuff, and I think that works for me. That might not work for everybody else, but I think it's
an important part of the whole thing. We talk about PVC on that value, which is personal, valuable, and credible. So your personal ones are where people want to know you, and I think there's people who give this sort of going back to being honest and transparent. People give this sort of very LinkedIn version of themselves, and then actually don't show who they are behind it. And I think people will buy into that. For you to be famous, we joked about it at the start, but being famous in your space isn't something which just happens. It's about people knowing you and knowing you're going to be there and seeing that consistency. Going back to the staple.
I'm not sure if I'm famous, but
I'm going to give you that credit. But people know you, right? People know you over time. So the personal stuff there is showing who you are. The valuable stuff is saying, right, what can you do to be useful? How can you add value to people who are in your space and show them the way through? And the credible bit is showing that you're good at what you do, and being able to, not crow, but showcase where you've added value to to the customers who you're dealing with. And I think if you can do that personal, valuable, and credible route on there, then people are going to look at it and they might not necessarily buy from you straight away, but when they think about who do I need to speak to, when I need to go to that next sort of phase, hopefully you'll be in the consideration, because you might not have been able to speak to 2,000 people every single day, but you can certainly do a post that gets seen by that number of people. So
very much so.
I could be talking about this for a long time. I knew I was going to enjoy this. I knew it was going to be a good conversation. So let's finish up by thinking about you're helping some really good businesses at the moment. You've got some interesting stuff on your thing. Who should be reaching out to? Who can you help? And what's the best way for them to do that?
So I think, the people that really are going to benefit from how I operate are sort of technical level people at organizations that want to build out or have got a project from the electronic trading space, whether that's something like co-location, raw market data, order execution. They want to understand what technology they want to use inside their trading stack. But they just want someone who's got an open and honest opinion without getting sold things. Of course, I think they would understand, and everyone will, that I will represent products. But I'm not a hard seller. I'm all about kind of solutionizing. So I think someone who, it doesn't matter whether you're looking at, I just want to start looking at electronic trading, or whether you are really in that high frequency world, but you want to understand how to optimize stuff. Now, I may not know all the answers, but the chances are I'll probably know someone who will, and I can introduce those people. So I think that's the first kind of role. But then the other side of it is, if you just want to help, if you want a bit of help, you want to understand, look, how did you do this, and what are the kind of things that you faced as challenges in your career, I'm always happy to sort of have a conversation and just hear people out.
Be the next mentor.
Well, I'd really enjoy it. I mean, I'd actually I think I have joined up with Urban Synergy, which is, I think it's Leela Thomas's setup. And I think I quite like the idea of mentoring. So, who knows, maybe we're mentoring this team. I think that's it. I mean, it's just about, if you want to, and this is the thing, there's no judgment. I think there's sometimes a little bit of paralysis where you say, I don't want to be known as I don't know this stuff, or is really interesting. I had a great example of when I did this. I think one of the big posts that I've done out there is this trading setup, like a trading architecture setup, and it was someone from one of the top HFTs who I would have expected to know this, going, do you know what, I didn't know any of this stuff. And it was a little bit of a showpiece, but it was interesting that person reached out to me, and I would have thought they would have already known this stuff, and they didn't. So I think that's the other thing, is there's no judgment here. It's we just want an open conversation. Let's have an open conversation, confidentially.
Done. And reaching out to you on LinkedIn is probably the best route, right?
Yeah, LinkedIn, or drop me an email on Tech Advocates is my website. It's up for a revamp soon, so don't judge me on the website.
Mate, it's been an absolute pleasure having you in. Thanks so much for dropping by, and glad we managed to get it in the can at last.
We did.
And I'll see you very soon. And thank you all for watching. We will see you soon on another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.